Okay, today we've got a lesson on unemployment, just the basics. And the words we're using today: the unemployment rate, the percentage of possible workers 16 years of age or older actively looking for a job. Now that's very specific, and we'll go into the different parts of that later. So I guess we could say there's an employment rate. So if there's an unemployment rate of 3%, that means 97% of everybody who wants to work 16 or older is working. So there's the opposite of the unemployment rate would be the employment rate. Okay. I think the most important, there's many different types of unemployment, but the most important one is cyclical unemployment. That is the one that will ruin an economy. That's the biggie. That's unemployment due to a bad economy. And finally, the idea of full employment, which means there is no cyclical unemployment. That means the economy is running fine, and basically everybody who wants to get a job will basically be getting a job after a short amount of time. Now, this is usually, it's not zero unemployment. It's usually 3 to 5% unemployment, which is, so full employment is not zero. It's about 3 to 5%. So that is worth noting when people say a country's at full employment or we're looking to get to full employment. It's also worth noting that anyone who wants to get to zero unemployment is ignorant about how the system works. 3 to 5% seems to be a sweet spot between unavoidable unemployment. Okay, there are going to always be some unemployed people, and we will talk about that later, temporarily unemployed, and 3 to 5% is an unemployment number that doesn't cause inflation. If the unemployment rate gets too low, bad things can happen. So the note for today is full employment is somewhere by 3 to 5%, and it means the economy is chugging along just fine. So let's examine who is unemployed. Well, you have to be 16 years old. It doesn't matter if you work. It doesn't matter if you want to work. If you're under 16, you're not unemployed. 16 years and older, and you have to be actively looking for a job. So anyone who's retired, they are not unemployed. Anyone who doesn't want a job, they are not unemployed. You have to be looking for a job and 16 years older. So who isn't unemployed? Well, anyone who doesn't want a job. If you don't want a job, you are guaranteed 100% not factored into the unemployment rates in the country. And there's also a class of people called discouraged workers. They want a job, but they have given up looking. The government does not include them in the unemployment numbers because they've given up looking. They don't have a job, they want one, but they're not looking for a job. So philosophically, why is employment good? Well, I can't say that employment is always good in every single situation throughout history, but what I can say is there is many good aspects to employment when you're looking at the economy of the United States. The economy of the United States and the economy of the world currently is set up for employment, and if employment happens, there's a lot of good that comes from it. Number one, employment is the engine of economic growth. Okay, working and creating new products and having a job and entrepreneurs making businesses, inventors coming up with new businesses and hiring people. This is the engine of economic growth. We're in the largest time of prosperity in human history, where the smallest number of people are in a global poverty rate. Okay, the smallest number in history, and those people who aren't in global poverty have access to more things in life than any time in history. More goods, more services, more healthcare. The average life expectancy of the world is staggeringly high compared to all of history. And a lot of that comes from the growth of this economic model, which is based upon employment and businesses of the last, 250, 300 years. It is the engine of the United States economic growth, and quite frankly, any country in the modern economy today. And in this scenario, employment fixes so many personal problems in one's life. Employment offers money to buy your necessities for your household. Employment removes too much free time, especially younger people with way too much free time on their hands sometimes get into lots and lots of trouble. So employment is an incredibly productive outlet for time, especially with younger, under 40-year-old people. Employment gives a sense of purpose. Now, it doesn't have to be your sense of purpose, but many times people want a sense of purpose, and employment can give that. Sense of purpose is one of the things for all of these are for a happy life. Having your necessities, a sense of purpose, a sense of responsibility, which is also kind of a sense of purpose, so they're sort of the same. And employment is an opportunity for achieving dreams. So when someone has a job, a lot of the times, achieving their dreams relies on the income of a good job. Now, not to say that you couldn't get all of these if the system was set up for something else, and there might be a way to create a society or a world, and I think you would actually have to create a world and get everyone on board where employment isn't that important, but the world we live in today, it is one of the drivers of a quality life. Now, can there be too much employment? We can go back and say, well, why don't we want to get this to zero, where every single person is working every second of the year? Not working every second, but they are always having a job and never unemployed at all. Well, there can be too much employment. Yes. So follow this logic here, this theory. Too much employment equals a shortage of workers. Okay. If there's no one looking for a job, that means any new business is going to have to steal workers from other places. And just as the country grows, there's going to be a shortage of workers. When there's a shortage of anything, the price goes up. So too much unemployment, shortage of workers, means there's going to be competition for those workers, and those workers are going to, their wages are going to rise really quickly, because that's how businesses get workers, is to pay them more. Now, you say, isn't that a great thing? Well, technically, it's a good thing to get paid more, but it happens too quickly. At 0% unemployment, the wages go sky high way too quickly. And if wages go up too quickly, that means there's too much inflation. Prices will rise, and inflation is an economy killer. We're trying, in the recent past, the number one job of the government is to regulate inflation and try to keep it as low as possible since the 70s. So all through the 80s, 90s, 10s, and 20s, the goal is to keep inflation as low as possible. Inflation is an economy killer. And one way we get inflation is if there's too much employment, or not that 3 to 5% unemployment. Okay, let's talk a little bit about why that 3 to 5% unemployment. Number one, it's good for not making prices rise too much, and also it's kind of natural and kind of unavoidable, all right? And it's temporary. There are many reasons why someone would be unavoidably, naturally, temporarily unemployed. So even when the economy is going really well, there's 3 to 5% people without a job because of one of these three reasons. Number one, natural, frictional, transitional unemployment. Friction is the forces between two things, okay? So you get friction there. And that's just forces between, because you're between times in your life, you're between jobs. Like, think about it. The person who graduates college in May might not start a job till August. Well, guess what? They might be unemployed at that point. If you quit a job, or get fired from a job, and it takes 1 month or 2 months or even 3 weeks to get a new job, that's a job change. You're unemployed during that time. People are always going from high school to jobs, colleges to jobs, one job to another. People are always getting fired. People are always quitting. People are always moving. So at any given time, there's 0.5%, 1% of the workforce is transitioning and having frictional unemployment. Similarly, there's seasonal unemployment. For example, lawn care. So there is plenty of people who can make really close to a good yearly salary by busting their butt during the lawn care season, but there's going to be like 3 months where they might be laid off. In construction, there's the peak construction time, and then there's the downtime. Well, make a lot of money during peak and then unemployed for 2 or 3 months during the downtime. And it could be for the winter. So a lot of time, a couple percentages of those workers really have 2 tough, 3 tough months of trying to find a job. They're unemployed, but then they'll get the job back. And this is called seasonal unemployment. And finally, a big category is called structural unemployment. It's basically there's jobs, but the person's skills don't fit those jobs, or the jobs have left. So there's a problem with the structure of the training and the jobs available. So I'll go through these. And these are always happening, okay? So there's a certain amount of people that just lack the training, okay? There might be a job, and it's literally in the same city, but guess what? The person doesn't have the skills for that job. And this doesn't mean the person messed up in their life. It's a mismatch, okay? So like, you could be trained for one thing, but there's a job as a teacher. You don't have the qualifications for a teacher. So if I were unemployed, I'd be structurally unemployed because there's tons of police jobs out there, but I don't meet the qualifications age-wise for a police job. So that'd be structural unemployment. It could be because someone just has zero skills. Okay, so if they got zero skills growing up in public education and then never got any other skills, well, that could be a lack of training too. New technology kills a product, which could make the workers obsolete and unemployed. I give the thing as the typewriter. Okay, we see typewriter factories go away. It's the typewriter got replaced. Landline phones with corded phones went away. So everyone who were in those factories was in those factories making that product, or typewriter repair people. Okay, they're going away because a new technology killed the old product. They are structurally unemployed. New resources could kill a whole industry, and this is what you would see with recently, 20 years, coal mining in the United States. New industry, oil and fracking, natural gas, solar, they're all killing the coal industry. Okay, so whole towns have been set up as coal mining towns. Well, those people are now unemployed, structurally unemployed. Their whole towns are unemployed because the resource killed the industry. It could be demand changes. Okay, if people don't want something anymore. There's a very simple example. There was a product called the Silly Band years ago. And the Silly Band was manufactured, I believe it was in Pennsylvania. And it became so popular that the person who created it in the factory decided to hire more people. I read an article on this. Hire more people and build or rent a new place. And so I assume they went through with that. Probably not a great idea because it was a fad. And you obviously know everyone loves Silly Bands and they had to get it. So of course you're going to make a lot of them and make a lot of money, but demand is going to change, okay? Literally within 1 or 2 years, kids don't like it anymore. And so all those people who were hired now have to be fired. They're unemployed. They are structurally unemployed because the demand changed. And by the way, it was probably also a really bad idea to invest in a new factory or whatever the article said, because if your product, I don't care how much it's selling, if your product can be easily made in China, and this is exactly what happened, within 3 months, China knew, and not China, but business people in China, and it doesn't matter what kind of patents the US person had, factories in China, business people were like churning out Silly Bands, and the things became so cheap, and then, boom, supply goes up, demand goes down, and the business tanks. And finally, the jobs, whole industries could move to other countries. This is called globalization. It was incredibly big in the early 90s and early 2000s. And the U.S. government said it would be very, very good. Well, that's a whole lesson on the positives and the negatives of free trade and globalization. The one thing it gives really, really, really cheap goods, okay, by having everything that can be made in China and Mexico and Vietnam very cheaply. It gives incredibly low prices in the United States, but whole industries leave the United States. Like, you cannot assemble an air conditioner in the United States anymore. You cannot have a good paying job assembling refrigerators in the United States. You just can't. Those jobs are gone. And so you had these huge sectors of good paying jobs move to other countries. You don't get to sew clothes anymore in the United States on a factory level. You could do it independently and boutiques, but you don't get to do it on a factory level and have a good paying job. Those jobs are gone. And anyone who used to be in those jobs were then structurally unemployed. Now, add up all these together. So at any given time during the year, there's about 3 to 5% people going through structural unemployment. And as long as the economy is churning along, we have procedures in place to help those people, and then they will get a job because the economy is doing well. We have unemployment insurance. So sometimes you get, if you lose your job through no fault of your own, you get paid until you get a new job. We have government training programs and incredibly cheap training programs and cheap colleges and training programs. So if you find yourself structurally unemployed, you can theoretically go get a job once you get retrained because the economy is doing well. All of these assume the economy is doing well. And finally, what if there is no unemployment insurance? Well, households usually have an emergency fund. And an emergency fund should be able to get you through seasonal, frictional, structural You should have an emergency fund of 6 months where you don't need a job. And then in a good economy, 6 months is enough to get to that next job. So I want to finish up with talking about cyclical unemployment. And this is the dangerous unemployment. Anytime you hear something like a recession or a depression in the economy, that means the business cycle has tanked. And a very powerfully bad positive feedback loop keeps the economy going, spiraling down. And so we can imagine that the growth of the economy is not just a nice, steady rate, although that would be amazing. The growth of an economy usually comes in booms and then busts. And then we grow and we boom again and then we bust. A boom and bust cycle, okay? During the bust, the going down, that's where there's not enough work. That's where people get fired. That's where people don't have enough money. So check out this circle. Like, sometimes there's a really big shock to the system. The most recent one was a pandemic, a COVID, which sent us into a downward spiral. There's also 2008. The housing market and the banks collapsed, is sending us into a downward spiral. 2001, the tech industry, the online stuff collapsed, sending us into a downward spiral. Okay, you see, it goes in waves. Once the shock happens in the downward spiral, think about it. Okay, all of a sudden, people don't have enough money and they stop spending. They stop buying things, which means there's less money going into the business, all businesses, which means the businesses have to cut costs. So they end up letting people go and firing them. Now those people have less money to spend, that they're unemployed. And because they have less money to spend, they buy less, which means the businesses have less money. So they let more people go. Now those people are unemployed. You see, this circle just keeps going over and over and over. It's a bad downward spiral that keeps flushing the economy down the toilet. So basically, how we've been trying to get out of those downward spirals is the governments, state, local, and federal governments basically just pump money into the economy, get people spending, and then the businesses come back, and it's sort of like a defibrillator. You shock the system, you pump money in, you give it some sort of money blood transfusion until everything gets healed. So all of a sudden, as soon as one of these things happens, the state will extend unemployment insurance up to a year instead of 6 months. Sometimes the federal government will give added money. So not only does someone get half their salary, but they'll get their other half of their salary for full salary from the state and federal government. Federal government will often immediately borrow billions, if not $1 trillion, at least billions, and then pump it into the economy. Now, sometimes they'll give it to people as a direct, here's like $1,000, here's $2,000. Sometimes they'll give it as loans to businesses, okay? Just getting money into the economy. And one thing that'll happen is the federal banks, the ones that determine how expensive it is to borrow money, the Federal Reserve will lower the interest rate on borrowing money. That means businesses can borrow money super, super cheap. And the more businesses borrow money, the more they can pay employees, the more they can expand, and just more money is more business. So basically on every shocked downturn, the federal government just opens the flood, bursts the dam, and lets money go into the economy so people can spend. All right, to sum up, so if you hear the country's unemployment rate and it's anywhere from 3 to 5, we're working on full employment and everything's fine. If it's lower than 3, be careful because the economy's running real hot and prices are going to rise. And if the employment rate is above 5, 6 through 12, that means we are in a recession, and that means things are not going well with the economy. All right, there's unemployment, the basics. Thanks for watching.